Can you believe what a difference 2 weeks make? Heck, can you believe what a difference 3 or 4 days can make? Because some really big news came out that made me redo this entire script because it changes the future of the M6 Mark II, and my recommendation going forward, like, just turned everything up on its head. Thanks, Canon. Now, I've been using this camera for the past 2 weeks, and it's much better than I really thought it would be. And with the current rumors coming out of Canon Europe, this might become so much better in the next few months. But hold on, we'll get there in a minute. So after these 2 weeks, should you go out and buy a Canon M6 Mark II? Let's find out. I've got more space now, so I can just slam things down. What's up, everyone? I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. So yes, we've got lots to cover today, and I'm gonna try to not talk at you for like way too long. So let's get into this tiny yet powerful camera. Now, we won't be going super in-depth today, as I've already made a series of videos talking about this camera, and you can find it at this link above. I never know which way to point, so I'm gonna point both, 50-50 chance. Now, what we're really gonna talk about is what do I really like and what do I not like so much after making all of these videos, because I've got a lot of time recording on this bad boy now, as all of the videos were made using this. Now, first up, before we get into it, I do still wanna thank my friends over at B&H Photo for loaning me this M6 Mark II to make these series of videos on. Now, if you'd like to get your very own little 4K beast, there will be links in that description below. Last time when we talked about the 90D, we started off with the positives. So today, to keep it interesting, let's start off with the negatives, because nothing is perfect, even though I do kind of like this camera. The very top thing that I dislike about this camera, and I know this might be a personal thing for me, it might not be a problem for you, but it's the mount. I mean, the EFM mount. And to be fair, it's not really the mount's fault, but the current lens selection. I mean, there just aren't that many quality EFM lenses currently available. You basically get a 22mm prime and a 32mm prime. Those are your best options. Yes, there is a vlogging type wide angle lens, and the kit lens isn't the worst kit lens, but it's not great. I mean, that's it. You've got 4 real options. We will talk about adaptability to different lenses and the things that I like, but I personally prefer native lenses built for the system they were designed for. And here it's really lacking, probably the most lacking camera lens system currently available. And a compounding negative to that is these lenses, if you buy EFM lenses, they only work on EFM cameras. There is no interoperability. So if you want to use this on a full frame camera, tough. You cannot adapt these to do anything else other than work on these devices. Hopefully there will be some Sigma primes coming out here soon for the M6 Mark II. I mean, heck, with the way updates are going, they might be out as I record this video. Whew, okay, you can pre-order them now. You can go to BH Photo and pre-order them, but they're not available yet. The way it probably will be tomorrow though, making this section invalid. So those Sigma primes are fantastic. Probably the 3 best lenses that you're gonna find for Sony E-mount and Micro Four Thirds. I mean, they basically define those systems, and getting another APS-C mount with that trio is gonna make the EFM so much more viable, and that will be something. Those lenses will be something that will bump this way up my recommendation list. Something else that I don't like, and you might not think it's a big deal again, but if you've spent as long as I have live streaming or using monitors or plugging your camera into something else, you'll know how terrible, how awful the micro HDMI port is, because it's barely functional. Like, it's a barely functional tech thing, and I hate it that when it's on any camera. I hate it because it's super fragile, and it's the first port that will break. And 2, anything plugged into micro HDMI falls out super easy. You look at your camera like a little bit wrong, micro HDMI cable is gonna fall out. You almost have to have a cable clamp to keep it in place, and I hate extra pieces, especially when it's for something dumb. And what frustrates me the most about this is the 90D has the darn mini HDMI, and I am totally willing to work with the mini HDMI because I like that port because it's functional. I have it on the Z6 right now. It's great. I mean, I will continue to complain about this until we can purge this foul mistake that was the micro HDMI port from the face of the earth. Okay. maybe a little too intense, still garbage. So one thing that was more of a positive for me in the beginning, but it's really starting to bother me, is while I do like the fully touch-enabled screen, the way the camera interfaces with this screen and the way it's set up, it's actually kind of infuriating to try and change the settings from in front of the camera. The way it spaces the shutter speed, the ISO, and the aperture on the bottom, it does it like right by the actual top of the body itself. So if you want to tap on something, like right now, you're probably gonna end up focusing, and you're gonna have to tap a whole bunch, and then you're gonna have to mess around, and it's not gonna work. It's kind of infuriating to do that. And if you wanna move the screen away, like, can you see that? Like, you move it like barely a fraction of an inch, and it reorients itself. So you're tapping, you push it out a little bit to reorient, it flips around, and then you gotta try to do it upside down. I mean, it's frustrating to try and use it. That's one of the reasons I prefer a flip out screen as opposed to the flip up screen. I will take any way to monitor myself that I can, but I don't have to like the interfacing, especially if I'm looking for an easy to use camera, which if I'm going for Canon, that's why I go for it. And the real big one that's about to go away, harkening back to all that intrigue at the beginning of the video, as of today, well, today is in yesterday, or today when I started writing the script, is probably a few days ago after, as you're watching this, the M6 and the 90D and the USRP, today they can only record in 30 frames per second. Well, Canon Europe decided to apparently fix it for Canon USA. Why? I don't know. Canon Europe is a PAL region and uses 25 frames per second, so you would think it would come out of Canon USA, but either way, Canon is going to release a firmware for those three cameras in the next few months to add 24 frames per second. Filmmakers rejoice! Hooray! You can have that resolution that you are so attached to. Now, again, I'm not a filmmaker, and so I don't really care, but I can be happy for the rest of the video space that you'll get that jerky cinematic footage that you love here soon. Ding! Seriously though, I'm very happy for you all. For the negatives, I mean, that's it. There are some problems, but honestly, none of these are deal breakers for me. So let's move on to the things I like, because there's a lot of them. First off, just straight off the bat, I really like the body of this camera, minus that awful HDMI port. It feels fantastic in the hand, and that's pretty surprising for such a small camera. Now, as we saw in the A6400 comparison, and again, I do very much like the A6400, so much so in fact that it is my top recommendation when people ask me what camera they should buy, but frankly, holding it sucks. Especially if you have a big lens on the front of it, it gets so tiring because it doesn't have a very good grip. The body's not really designed for long periods of time holding heavy weight. The M6 Mark II actually is very comfortable, and a large portion of that is due to this huge grip on the side. I mentioned this previously, but something that Canon has done very consistently, I mean, they've consistently done it right in their redesign of their new cameras, is the new bodies. They all feel fantastic. Plus, body-wise, it also has 3 specific dials, so you can change the entire exposure triangle, shutter speed, ISO, and aperture from the body itself without needing to use a touchscreen. Some of us prefer analog changing things up, so instead of changing your aperture by boop, sliding it around, you're just like, done. I like buttons and dials. The next thing that I like, I actually caught some flack in the comment section for this over the last few weeks, is the removable electronic viewfinder, or EVF. I absolutely adore this thing, and the main reason I adore it is I can get rid of it if I don't want it. I hate, something else that I don't like is I don't like that every camera has to waste space, design time, and just on having the best, most useful viewfinder. I mean, I never use them. Okay, maybe I've used them once or twice, but I don't use them, so I like this. This is an elegant solution for me. On the one hand, I almost never bring it out, but if I do want it, it's available. So I rarely take, I'm not a professional photographer, I never use flashes, so that's not a big deal for me. If you need flashes and you need a viewfinder, I probably would not get this camera. There, that's a bone I'm throwing to you photographers out there. But I like customization, and this gives me a level of customizability that I straight up haven't seen on a small consumer camera before. Something else I really like, and it's not really that big of a surprise, is Canon's dual pixel autofocus. And yes, I do think Sony has caught up with them and surpassed them from some of their cameras. I mean, honestly, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The autofocus system between the two systems, they're both so good and reliable that you never have to worry if you are in focus. Tap and it works, put your face in it and it works. And if you're crazy and you like manual focusing, they even put focus peaking in it. As someone that's always trying to explain something on the camera, I generally want myself in focus because I'm a raging narcissistic millennial. I am a millennial at 36, and having this level of autofocus is great, and it's awesome that their eye detection autofocus will even catch my eye through my sunglasses. I'm always wearing sunglasses because, again, cool hip millennial. I can't help who I am. Why this is so cool is I know camera brands whose face tracking autofocus gets broken if you wear sunglasses. Cough, cough. Fuji. Cough, cough. But that's not a surprise. Canon and good autofocus isn't something to write home about. I mean, they've basically had that on lock since the 70D. So something that's really surprised me is how well their latest cameras have electronic image stabilization. I mean, how good that stabilization is actually surprising to me. And I do think that electronic image stabilization is the future, so I might be a little bit biased here, but what they've done here does well enough to take the shake out, especially if you are using wide angle lenses. This might not totally replace your gimbal if you're a caffeine addict, but it works well enough. Something that I want you to note is I've had no problem going straight handheld footage for all of everything that you've seen shot on the M6 so far in the last 2 weeks has been with this handheld. The stabilization works, and it works well. While I do give the screen guff for the way the interface is laid out, I actually like very much this still has a touch screen. Look, companies, it's 2019. It's almost 2020. 2020, we're looking at self-driving cars right now. There is no excuse for any piece of functional technology that has a screen to not have that screen be touch enabled. We've been accustomed to touch screens for years. Everything needs them going forward. Sony, man. A lot of call outs today. Next, I'm gonna try to talk out of both sides of my mouth here for a second. So figuratively, not exactly literally. I may not be able to recommend a lens mount with so few lenses to you, but I personally don't use that many lenses on my own cameras. There's 2 lenses that I generally need. I need a 35mm full frame equivalent and a cheap zoom lens for B-roll. The 22mm f2 on the EFM is one of my favorite lenses of all time because it's that 35mm equivalent. While this camera body isn't mine, this is my lens. I've had this 22mm for almost a year and a half. I keep this around because it's so small, but it also turns these cropped censored mirrorless cameras into absolute viable talking head YouTube cameras for me. It's basically an essential lens for me. I mean, it does all of that. And something that we mentioned we'd talk about later is if you want bigger lenses, something that is uniquely available to Canon's EFM mount, and specifically here, as this is one of the widest Canon 4K options, there are speed boosters available for the M6 Mark II. So you can turn this tiny body into almost a full frame equivalent camera. You might wonder at that point, why not just get the EOS RP because it would be cheaper? And if the EOS RP gets uncropped 4K with its 24 frames per second update, then yes, I would recommend that over this. But it won't because that would eat into EOS R sales and Canon's not about to do that. So the M6 will end up being the best budget 4K Canon crop option because of its adaptability with all of the full frame lenses. Seriously, mark my words, here in a few months, this right here, the M6 Mark II, will be an absolute monster to compete against. Heck, there are other benefits to this camera, but we are nearing 2,000 words for the script, and these are the major pluses or minuses. But at the end of the day, so what, right? With all of these comments, with all of these remarks about the camera, do I recommend the M6 Mark II? Today, no, I probably wouldn't recommend it. There are better options out there for less money. The A6400. It is the best camera out right now. But if you do really want to stick to Canon, I would say yes, but hold off on buying this until the 24 frames per second firmware actually comes out. It's one thing to put out a press release saying you're gonna do it. It's another to actually release that firmware. And when you can have 24 frames per second, you can put those Sigma primes on this, it's gonna be tough to beat. Thanks for watching.